Hello, everyone. Juxtaposition here. Hope you're having a wonderful day. Today is Wednesday, July 29th, 2026. Do get your Juxtaposition 1 coffee mug if you haven't already. This cub best symbolizes the content you'll find on my Juxtaposition 1 channel, Brutal Truth. And today's Brutal Truth is the clown show known as the United States Senate. From every one of our strategic hamlet districts, um, representing the wealthy in America, the Hunger Game known as America. Today we have a origins of COVID investigation chaired by Rand Paul, who's an ophthalmologist medical doctor. That's for eyes, looking into eye disease, illness, surgery, treatments for your eyes. But he doesn't see patients. So we have Rand Paul, who likes to put the initials DR in front of his senatorial name, Paul, P-A-U-L, Dr. Paul. But he's not really a doctor. He's more of a fake doctor. I mean, he's as much a doctor as Dr. Phil, Dr. Oz, Dr. Drew Pinsky, okay, Dr. Ruth Westheimer, right? Dr. Shivalgo, right? Dr. Victor Davis Hanson, Dr. Jeffrey Sachs, Dr. Jennifer Ann Doudna of CRISPR Therapeutics, Cas9, DNA, gene editing, and human augmentation. Jennifer Doudna has the title of Chancellor of Biomedicine. See patient. She's not a medical doctor. She has a degree in chemistry. Isn't that interesting? We have Jennifer Doudna. She's not a doctor, but she's the chancellor of biomedicine at UC Berkeley. Yes, and she went to Harvard. She has an undergrad degree from Harvard, and she has a PhD from, I'm not sure if it's from Berkeley. It's from some Ivy League school. Think that's interesting. Do you know there's not one single medical doctor who sees patients, who testifies on television or makes a statement on television, or who will appear on my show, or will appear on Joe Rogan's show? Uh-uh. Dr. John Campbell, he's not a doctor. He's not a nurse. John Campbell from England. John Campbell. Yeah, he taught nurses how to apply bandages, but he doesn't see patients. He's not what we call a clinician. He's not a clinician. He doesn't see patients. Dr. John Campbell has 3.5 million followers on YouTube, but he's not a doctor. But he uses the term Dr. John Campbell, right? Like Dr. Jane Ruby doesn't see patients. She wears a white Yeti coat and has a stethoscope, which gives you a sign and a symbol that she's a medical doctor who sees patients. She's not. She's a potato in your tailpipe. Dr. Jane Rubenstein, she does go on Israeli television and talk about COVID, but she doesn't see patients. Then we have another one. Is a medical and doesn't see patients. Naomi Wolf of Los Angeles County. She appeared on television during the COVID hoax, during the origins of the COVID hoax. She appeared many times on television. In fact, every single person who appeared in the first 2 years of the COVID hoax is a fraud. Okay, 100%. They're all like Richard Gages wearing white coats and calling themselves doctors. Richard Gage, the little bald-headed, four-eyed creep who went on to become the leader of the Architects and Engineers for Truth. Remember him, the civil engineer that doesn't go to work and doesn't draw plans for buildings? A civil engineer with no civil engineering affiliations. Went on to become a babysitter of chemists at the National Lab for the Department of Energy. That Richard Gage. The Richard Gage that doesn't actually do any engineering at all. What he does is read a bunch of bald-faced lies, investigate something for decades, and never get to the bottom of it. Well, the Richard Gage Clown Show, which is COINTELPRO, counterintelligence, the Richard Gage Clown Show is a mirror image of the Rand Paul getting into the origins of COVID clown show subcommittee for the United States Senate. This is the same body of criminals, the United States Congress. This is the same criminals, steroids in baseball. I don't know if anybody remembers. There was an investigation into the origins of steroids in baseball. At no time did they ever try to look into fixing the World Series like had been done in 1919 successfully with the Boston Red Sox and the Chicago White Sox. It was called the Black. They turned into the Black Sox because they threw the game so Boston could win. That was being done before Rand Paul was born. That was being done before the steroid investigation into baseball was done. There already was fixing and rigging the World Series. They didn't get into corked bats, corked balls, blind umpires, umpires with seeing eye dogs. They didn't get into that. They didn't get into the rigging and cheating of the officiating in baseball. They invited the NFL football, who brought an unlicensed medical doctor who had, again, doesn't see patients, and he assured the committee there was no doping in football because it's not necessary. Just because it's a violent game and people break their ribs every play does not mean you need cortisone or opium or morphine or amphetamines or blood doping or growth hormones. And they also invited, I believe, David Stern, who was the commissioner of NBA, National Bastards, also National Basketball Association. He said there's no need to take steroids to play basketball. I guess it's kind of a sissy game where you don't need drugs. Anyway, they looked into that. It was a big deal on television, and they never found any steroids, and they never did anything about it. And they got a lot of autographs. They got Roger Clemens' autograph. They didn't want to get Jose Canseco's autograph because he was the scapegoat. He was the William Calley of the investigation into steroids in baseball. We had Frank Church look into pneumatic air guns and listening devices, spying on Americans, having meetings with William Colby, the CI director, 53 times. They never at any time did anything about surveillance or spying on Americans without a warrant. Warrantless searches, warrantless search and seizure of your personal data. Nothing was ever done about that. In the 1970s, they looked into the spying on Americans and took no action whatsoever. They never take any action because you know why? This theater, it's there to waste your time. To waste your time. Do you get it now? That's pacification and control. That's the purpose of these clowns. And on this committee today, on the dais, was Ron Johnson, who's a senator from Wisconsin, which is always confusing to me because he was born in Minneapolis, in Minnesota. He was born in Minnesota, but he became a senator from the state next door, Wisconsin. And Rand Paul was born in Pennsylvania, and he went to school in North Carolina and in Texas. He went to Baylor first in Texas. Then he got his medical degree at Duke School of Medicine, which is in Durham, North Carolina. But he becomes a senator of Kentucky, having never before having any real connections there. He did have an office for his ophthalmology in Bowling Green, Kentucky. This is the height of hypocrisy for me, people. Rand Paul is a fraudulent hypocrite, and he's blind as a bat. Here he is presenting himself as a doctor, Dr. Rand, and the chairman of the committee looking into the origins of COVID. Does not in real life. It only exists for television presentations like Rand Paul's Poppycock Magician Magic Act show. Rand Paul is an eye doctor, and he doesn't have 20/20 vision. He has no vision. He's blinder than Stevie Wonder. Dr. Rand Paul is blinder than Helen Keller. He doesn't know what a chemtrail is. He looks at the sky. He doesn't see any pollution. He doesn't see the chemtrail airplanes. Not only is Rand Paul blind as a bat, He's deaf. He's deaf and dumb. He doesn't hear the jets. He doesn't see the jets. He's never seen a smart meter. He doesn't know what a smart meter is. He doesn't know what a ring camera is. He doesn't seem to know what an LED light is. He doesn't know what molecular engineering is. He doesn't know what an MRI machine is, even though he presumably worked at a hospital, but he doesn't know what an MRI machine is. Maybe he knows about retina surgery. But anyway, the guy is clueless. So he's going to look into COVID. COVID is the Havana syndrome. It's radiation poisoning. And if you don't see the smart dust in the air, if you don't see the aluminum chalk and the polymers, you're not qualified. Not only are you not qualified to chair the committee, you're not qualified to be on television because you're too stupid and you're too blind and you're too deaf and you're too dumb. You're blind, deaf, and dumb. That's Rand Paul, who is the son of another fraud by the name of Ron Paul, another fake senator who believes in liberty and the Constitution. One country. You see what clowns these are? Rand Paul, Ron Paul, Chuck Schumer, Ron Johnson. He chaired a committee looking into COVID vaccine injured, where he offered hope to the hopeless. He's taken no action whatsoever for any of the thousands of people who have written to him and appeared at wasted people's time at committees that he hosted and took no action. Ron Johnson is a fraud. Confusing today is Ron Johnson is sitting up on the dais right next to the right of Rand Paul, which of course is embarrassing because Rand Paul is a fraud. And Ron Johnson isn't even on the committee to look into the origins of COVID. He doesn't sit on that committee. He does sit on other committees, which you could argue have shared responsibility insofar as national homeland security matters and security. And that's really what brings Ron Johnson together with Rand Paul is mandates of vaccination and the mandates of travel restriction and the mandates of masking and sheltering in place. Department of Homeland Security. That's what brings Rand Paul and Ron Johnson. Because normally got anything in common other than the fact that they put lipstick on pigs and pretend to be important leaders of our country when neither are. So today, Anthony Fauci was subpoenaed and dragged before the committee. Of course, he brought a half a dozen attorneys with him, one of whom insisted on sitting to the right side of Dr. Fauci, who, if you don't know, he's 5'7". Dr. Fauci stands 5'7". Rand Paul stands 5'8". So Rand Paul's not much taller than the short Dr. Fauci. Again, Dr. Fauci doesn't see patients, so he's not a legitimate doctor on the juxtaposition channel. Ron Johnson stands 5'10". He's the tallest, but technically he's not even on the committee. He's not even supposed to be sitting next to Rand Paul, but there he is. These are signs and symbols, people, that we have people who are not on the committee sitting as if they are on the committee and that they have a vote or authority when they do not. There's Rand Paul because he's selling trust to the vaccinated injured because he has no intention of ever taking action against Geneva, Switzerland. Geneva Global Governance is in charge. Rand Paul has no authority over the United Nations or the WHO, which is an agency of the United Nations. He has no authority over the World Economic Forum or maritime law, which governs the policies throughout the world for COVID hoaxes. Dr. Anthony Fauci refused to answer questions today directed by Rand Paul. He took his Fifth Amendment right. He asserted his right to not incriminate himself. On the advice of counsel, I respectfully declined to answer the question based upon my rights under the Fifth Amendment of the Constitution. Dr. Fauci said this repeatedly as Republican members of the Senate Homeland Security Commission questioned him. Senator Rand Paul, the panel's chairman, pointed out and warned Dr. Fauci that there will be repercussions for his refusal to answer questions. When the lawyer sitting to the right of Dr. Fauci, whose name is David Shurtler, when he piped up and continuously interrupted Rand Paul, then Rand Paul ordered security to escort Mr. Lawyer Shurtler from the room. Dr. Fauci was invited to testify here today, the senator said later. His lawyers were not. The decision not to testify marked the latest turn in the long running battle between the pseudo Dr. Anthony Fauci, who spent nearly 4 decades as the government's top infectious disease expert, and Senator Rand Paul, who accuses Dr. Fauci of funding research in China that sparked the pandemic and then lying about it to Congress. Accusations Dr. Fauci vehemently denied publicly, but did not deny under oath. All right. So what I want you to tell you is that the bigger liar in this case is actually Rand Paul. He's the biggest liar of all. There is no lost virus in China. There may be, I'm sure there are research labs in China. None of them release deadly viruses, okay? None of them. Zero. Nada. It's impossible. Could never happen. You can't get a global pandemic unless you have cellular phones and molecular engineering and ring cameras and satellites. It's impossible to have a flu virus in Cuba, Istanbul, Turkey, in Adelaide, Australia, in Honolulu, Hawaii, in Los Angeles, California, San Francisco, Chicago, Dallas, um, Durham, North Carolina, Charlotte, North Carolina, Manhattan, New York, London, England, and Oslo, Norway simultaneously. It's impossible. The only thing that you can do in a nanosecond is to send out text messages or voice over IP or magnetic resonance telecommunication pursuant to Geneva's ITU, which is International Telecommunications Union, and the IEEE protocols. The IEEE, which is in Manhattan, New York, and also in New Jersey. That's the protocols for communication under radio frequency throughout the world. That's COVID. That's Havana syndrome. That's radiation poisoning delivered by a radiation deployed military system that today we refer to as the Internet of Everything. But it's also radio frequency, it's television, microwaves, it's sub-millimeter waves. Today it travels on the smart dust, which are the micro-mechanical sensors, which Ron Paul doesn't know a thing about MIMS and MIMOs. He doesn't know about MOSA or SOSA operating systems. He does not understand messages. He doesn't know what smart dust is. He doesn't know what dust networks is. He doesn't know what CRISPR therapeutics is. He doesn't know what gene editing, gene splicing is. He doesn't know what human augmentation is. Read the nation's Agenda 2030 sustainability plan. Rand Paul is a clueless senator from Kentucky. And incidentally, besides being completely clueless about COVID, I believe that Dr. Fauci knows even less than Rand Paul does, and Rand Paul knows less than zero. Rand Paul doesn't even know that the Superior Court judges in his state of Kentucky run bordellos and prostitution rings using their probation departments and the county jails, right under Rand Paul's nose. Rand Paul is a senator of a bordello. Kentucky is a state of whiskey and bordellos and a doped horse race. Rand Paul doesn't even know that the horses that compete in the Kentucky Derby are doped to the gills, just like a Tour de France cyclist is, just like a Super Bowl NFL football player is. The horses in Kentucky are as big a dope as Rand Paul. Ron, Ron Johnson is a dope of a senator from Wisconsin, despite having been born in Minnesota. All right. That's my rant for today. I hope you enjoy. You know that everything operates under maritime law and that the captain or the skipper of a ship doesn't necessarily handle the tiller or the wheel. You do know that, right? You do know that the commander of a United States aircraft carrier does not pilot the aircraft. And by the way, they do have a pilot on the bridge. He's also known as the officer of the watch. They don't necessarily touch the wheel either. It's the helmsman, the man on the wheel is the helmsman, also known as steerman. And that seems to be lost in the congressional subcommittees or senatorial subcommittees. Everybody is wrongly assuming that the chairman, who in this case is Rand Paul, that he's the most knowledgeable person. He knows nothing. He knows nothing. He doesn't know that COVID stands for Certification of Vaccine Identity, Real ID. Okay. 19 stands for Internet Protocol. It stands for 19.1, it stands for artificial intelligence. I is the ninth letter of the alphabet, and 1 is the letter A, the first letter of the alphabet. So it's certification of vaccine identity, artificial intelligence, also today known as real. It is. Has nothing to do with the flu, has nothing to do with barfing or being nausea. What does have to do with nausea and spatial problems and attention deficit and senile dementia and tumors in your brain and turbo cancer, what has to do with that is exposure to radiation. And you are surrounded today with smart meters, ring cameras, and LED streetlights and smart dust, drones over your head, and CubeSats in space. And not a single one of the things I just mentioned will ever be brought up in the United States Senate, and certainly not if Rand Paul, the clueless eye surgeon with no vision himself, his hearing, he's deaf and he's blind. Rand Paul is deaf and he's blind. And so is Ron Johnson, who is a cover artist for COVID hoax fraud. All right. Juxtaposition, you could call me a lieutenant commander, and I don't necessarily pilot my ship, nor do I necessarily handle the wheel. But I don't go aground, okay? I have a helmsman that I trust in. And I don't have a limo driver. I don't have wardrobe expert. I don't have makeup. But you know what? I do have a rudder, and it is strongly and most vividly, most sincerely attached to my wheelhouse. All right? So when I say that Rand Paul is a dunce, he is. And I understand that this is a humiliation ritual to heap more hatred onto Anthony Fauci. But that just detracts from the fact that all the United States senators are criminals themselves. You know what happens in the behind closed doors, when they have what they call the closed hearings. They bring in Jeffrey Epstein's girls or Rand Paul's prostitutes from the jails of Kentucky, and they have a party. That's what goes on in what's called closed to the public sessions. They have prostitutes from Rand Paul's state and Ron Johnson's state, too, I bet. You think Ron Johnson doesn't run a bordello over there? I'll bet he does. I'll bet he does. That's my video for today.